Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Kinsta Talks video. Today we have Tor-Björn Fjellner in the call again. Hello, Toby. Friends can call you Toby, right?
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. And yes, you're certainly allowed to call me Toby.
Yes, great. So Toby has been doing a lot of contributions to WordPress, and we are sponsoring him for the Kinsta Community Sponsorship Program. And in this video, we're going to do a little update on what Toby has been doing and maybe how other people can be involved and help the WordPress project go even further. So Toby, can you please introduce yourself in short to the audience?
Yeah, my name is Torbjörn or Toby. I'm Swedish, live in Spain right now. Before that, I have worked and lived in a lot of different countries. The last strange country I was living in was Finland. This winter, I worked 2 months in Tampere, and that was my first return to a really harsh winter for a long time. But I survived, it looks, so that's okay.
So the
And
temperature is a little bit different now, right?
yeah, we have had like plus 35 outside every day. I live just outside of Barcelona, so I guess I have to get used to it. And with WordPress, I have been doing more or less the same thing I always do, which is I'm one of the global mentors for the Polyglots team. So I kind of do things behind the scenes to make sure that things work. One thing that happens all the time is that new people come around and they may need a helping hand to realize where they need to go or whom they need to talk to. And I often take care of that unless someone else gets before me. Polyglots is a huge team, so there are a lot of people online, I would say, all day long. So every now and then someone else will get there before me, but still I go and double check to see if there is anything that still needs to be added or mentioned. So that's one thing. And then also we've got the more formal process where plugin developers and people who have translated some strings want to have them reviewed and want to be assigned as translation editors. So they can make a post on our make polyglots, make wordpress.org/polyglots blog where they request this translation editor status or PTE, and I make sure that the right people see these requests. I mark off when something has been already handled and keep track if something doesn't get handled. And if nobody responds and it has been more than 2 weeks, then I may step in and make a decision on behalf of some local team. So that is something I keep track on almost every day, make sure that we don't have any pending requests that aren't yet published and so on. And in parallel, I also am one of the moderators on the global forums. I'm by far not the most active one, but my specialty is that I'm one of the few located in the European time zone. So if I've got time and capacity for it in the morning, I try to go and have a look to see if there have been any things hanging around waiting to be published, some new posts or comments. Uh, well, this time of the day when America is asleep, things may be a little bit slow, so it may be a couple of hours, sometimes even a bit more before your comment gets published. But still, don't worry. For the global blog, global forums, we go there all the time and make sure that nothing is pending. It's a little bit harder on the localized forums in different languages because some of them have very few people around. Or, for instance, in the Swedish forums, where I'm the most active support contributor, although it's a very small and quiet forum, so even if I'm the biggest contributor, that doesn't take that much time. But sometimes we have several questions within 1 week, so yeah, it can happen. But
Cool.
we may miss when there is something pending because it's not that visible, and I may just forget to check because something gets stuck in moderation or in the automated spam queue perhaps once in 3 to 4 months, and
Oh,
then
wow.
when it's so seldom, you forget to check every day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Switching back to the polyglots stuff,
Yes.
I heard you mentioned GTE and PTE.
Yeah.
I know the terms, but maybe our audience isn't aware of what these abbreviations mean. Can you explain these?
Yes. So we have defined about 200 different locales in WordPress that are different language versions that are defined that you theoretically could translate WordPress to, but for this to happen, of course, it's all volunteer powered. So you need an active team to actually make some translations happen. And we've got around 50 to 60 more or less active locales. So, well, Dutch, for instance, is a special one because we've got, well, it's NL underscore and NL again. That is Dutch for Netherlands. It's one of the locales and it has got two variants because it's got both the standard or default, which is informal address. But then you've got a formal address, which is the same thing, but a different variant. And we've got these kind of different variants with a few locals, but Dutch is one of them. So these teams are usually mentored by hopefully several, but at least one GTE. It's a general translation editor. This person has translation editor access to everything under this locale. And of course, it's a lot. So usually this person will not be able to translate everything. They will not be able to check everything. But what they try to do is to keep an eye on things like having an updated glossary, mentoring new people, checking when someone new starts to translate, if there is anything they need to make a little bit different or better to create a similar customer or end user experience all over the line. I mean, we translate WordPress core separately from plugins and separate from themes. And if we make sure that we always call plugins the same thing everywhere, it will be much easier to use WordPress for an end user. So we've got term glossaries, and these are maintained by the GTEs. The GTE also is kind of a team leader, so they may try to create some more interest. They may try to inform people about the wonderful possibility to contribute to WordPress. I mean, hey, you can translate one string and you're already contributing, right? And so that's the GTE. And then a PTE is also a translation editor, but they have been given the translation editor role for one or several projects. And a project here could be a specific plugin, for instance, WordPress, WooCommerce, or it could be a WordPress theme like 2025, one of our default themes, or it could be all plugins. Sometimes we call that a super PTE, and those are usually people with quite good translation skills and quite experienced. And sooner or later, a super PTE may actually become a GTE. So that's the term. Then we've got actually another set of terms that is not about the translation, but about the local itself. So you have a local manager, which is like the manager for the localized version of the WordPress.org site. So nl.wordpress.org, you don't have a manager for that because it's a multi-site network. It's huge. It's actually a network of networks. So if you want to see how you can do really weird and big things with a WordPress multi-site, then you can look at what we are doing on WordPress.org because it's enormous. So a local manager has the possibility to publish things in the news for their locale, and they can assign GTEs, then they can assign PTEs, they can even assign themselves as a GTE. So if you are a local manager, then you can do a lot. But they can also assign people as editors and content contributors for your local version of WordPress.org. So if you're seeing this and you're thinking that it would be nice to see a bit more about what is happening about WordPress in my region, in my language, go and look at our list of local teams and find who is a local manager and try to get in touch with them. I think we can add some comment under this interview about this, because
Yeah, we
me
can.
spelling out some URLs here doesn't really make sense.
No, we can add those URLs to the content of
Yeah.
the video. The fun thing is with these local websites, basically for WordPress, you have a medium to keep in contact with your community, your local community. People are needed, of course. You know, we have all the teams, make.wordpress.org/ well, whatever team, they all have their blog. But to keep things centralized for a locale, that is really helpful. In this instance, for nl.wordpress.org, we have a /team page, where we
Yes.
update stuff about what's happening, and that's really a good place to share things that are happening within your local WordPress community.
It's not even a separate page, it's a separate site. Remember I said something about network of networks, right?
I try to keep it
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah. So just like you've got a blog for every make team, you've got this little blog for every local team. Some teams are using it, some teams are not really using it. And it is a useful tool when people start communicate. And just like we do in make.wordpress.org/polyglots, where we post requests and we tick them off, we have the same functionality in these teams blogs, and some local teams are using them.
Yes, indeed. So if we look at you mentioned some other term, the glossary. I'm not aware if our audience is aware of what the glossary is and how this can help them with translating WordPress to their local language.
Okay, we should probably do a screen share session next time, but in short, you can translate WordPress not content, but formats like plugins and themes via a platform called translate.wordpress.org. And you may translate directly on this site. And when you're doing that, then on the left side, you will have the original string as it is in the code. And hopefully that will be in American English, because WordPress regards every untranslated string as being in American English, even if it is written in Cyrillic, right? So, and then on the right side, you've got the list where you translate these things string by string. You double click on a string, it will open up a little bit wider, and then you will see this original string, the source string. You may see some comments if there were some given in the code as information to the translator. And there is a little arrow you can open up to get links to where in the code this string is used. And that is sometimes useful, sometimes not very useful, especially for strings that are used in JavaScript, because typically you will have the link to the minified, uglified JavaScript, which just doesn't say anything. But for things in PHP code, you can very open up and see how the string is used, and that is sometimes very helpful. Now, we maintain as GTEs, I'm Swedish GTE, so I have the right to say I'm a GTE, term glossary, which is things that would match something on the source side. If there is a glossary entry, for instance, plugin, as I mentioned before, it will be underscored with some dashes on the source side. And if I hover over with my mouse pointer, I will see a little pop-up that tells me how we prefer to translate this word to Swedish. So a lot of people say always plugin even in Swedish, but the term we've got in the glossary is actually tillägg, which is, well, same thing but in Swedish. And I try to usually correct this just to get this coherent language experience when you're using WordPress. So that is one example. And some locals have a lot of these terms defined. For instance, for British English, yes, you can translate to British English, and the main difference between British English and American English is in spelling. A lot of things that end in IZE in American English, standardized, for instance, will in most cases, if it is at least somehow relevant, be captured by a term, and you will see it marked with these hyphens, and then you can quickly see what you need to change. So British English team have a huge glossary.
Okay, so basically, thanks for the explanation. So basically, the glossary is really helpful for people to check if a string has already been translated and to be coherent in all the translation, so that the word plugin is not, well, in this case in Swedish, is not plugin on one page and, well, the Swedish alternative, I can't pronounce it, sorry, on a
It's
different
fine.
page. This really helps to keep all the translations coherent, and I think that's a great thing for the translations to make it professional in this case, right?
Yeah, and some people who are using external tools to speed up the translation work, you may use some kind of machine translation. If you're able, well, for instance, if you're using some kind of large language model to help you with translation, then you could export this term glossary for your locale and upload it to ChatGPT or whatever tool you are using. And also a lot of GTEs have created and maintain a style guide, especially of course for things like Dutch, where you've got two different variants, and there will be instructions in the style guide about what is the difference between these two variants, what you need to check and keep in mind. And these things you could also try to upload to ChatGPT and hope that it won't choke and get totally filled up and not be able to work afterwards. And then you will get better quality. But still, again, translating WordPress is a human task, and you should never ever upload unchecked machine translation, because that is like asking for trouble.
Yes.
Machine translations are getting better, which help us to speed up the work, but you always need to double check that, yes, this is indeed a correct translation and it has the same style that we need and want, and so on.
Yeah, I can totally underscore that. You know, I've been a GTE for the Dutch language, and we've seen a lot of bad translations that are obviously coming from machine translations. You know, they're just not right. They totally miss context on whatever happens in WordPress. Yeah, it's definitely not good. So a human is still needed. Humans are still needed.
Yes.
And to close off this interview, I would like to ask you one final question. And that is, since Kinsta is sponsoring you with your contributions to WordPress, I was wondering if you can explain to people how important it is, if you contribute to WordPress and you contribute a lot of time to WordPress, how important it is for you that you get sponsoring.
So right now, I'm actively looking for job. And I would say that Kinsta sponsoring me 3 hours a week is what really makes it possible for me to continue doing this. And I'm so grateful for it, really. I mean, it helps me, and it helps me to help WordPress, because I have been like central contributor to the Polyglots team now for the last 7 or 8 years. And there are things that I can do quite quickly and efficiently, and I have already sorted out a lot of problems and conflicts before, which means that I'm able to much quicker and with better quality handle things that may occur not that very often. So I'm glad for that. Now, one thing where I will try to spend a bit more time in the nearest future, if I will be able to do it, based on how much I'm busy with other things, is that we've got quite a long list of requests to add new locals to the system. And they need to be double checked and vetted and triple checked, that things like definitions for what different types of plural forms are possible depending on specific numbers and so on in every language. In English, it's easy. It's like, okay, it's one, and then it's singular. If it is anything else, then it is plural. And that's very easy. And we've got exactly the same in Swedish and the same thing in Dutch. But for instance, French is different because they will use singular for zero as well. And we need to define this in the system. And that is still quite easy to understand. But then you come to Slavic languages, for instance, where depending on the number, you can have three different versions. And they will use singular for one, but also for 21, 31, 51 and 101. And then they have something called dual, which is if the number is 2, 3, or 4, or it ends in a pronounced 2, 3, and 4, which is 22, 23, 24, and so on.
Wow.
Then you have a second form. And if it is anything else, then you have plural. And it's the same in Polish, for instance. And this needs to be correctly defined for every locale. And I could go on forever, but
I know, and I think you already said in halfway in this interview that we might do a screen share in this in the next interview, and I also think the plural thing is something we could do another interview on and to dive a little bit more into details.
Yeah. I mentioned it quite deeply in the talk I had at the WordCamp Europe in Athens 2 years ago, where I was talking to, I would say, developers about common errors that they often commit in how they are preparing plugins and themes for translation. And we could make a deep dive into some of those topics in the future. That's fine.
Yeah, definitely would be cool. For now, I would like to thank you for your time for this interview. I'm going to wish you a lot of strength with the heat that is currently in and around Barcelona. And I'm looking forward to talk to you next time. So thank you very much, Toby.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.